It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. I was living in an apartment house above Franklin and Ivar. I had an original story kicking. And there's another thing. It's pretty simple to shoot. Lots of outdoor stuff. Started sending out a general SOS.
Bury him in the garden. Any city laws against that? But that wasn't good enough for them. Oh, no. They had to read the scene just before she has him killed.
Never let another writer read your... She was still sleepwalking along the giddy...
Not here. That's what I told you.
Good.
But they found your car.
What is it? Where's the fire?
I've lost my car.
Valentino said there's nothing like tile for a tale.
Now, if I got you correctly, there's a short stretch of my fiction which you found.
Third, Grandma did stunt work for Pearl White.
Sunset Boulevard.
Wait. Look at my hands. Look at my face. Joe. Joe.
Oh, and they must have photographed me 1,000.
And I promise you I'll never desert you again.
Sunset Boulevard, 1950, opens with a striking image. A man's body floating lifeless in a luxurious swimming pool. The scene is somber, but it doesn't immediately explain how this tragic outcome came to be. As the camera pulls back, we hear the voice of Joe Gillis, the dead man, narrating his own story. Joe begins by describing his life, a life that was once full of promise, now ruined by Hollywood's unforgiving grind. This moment, his death, is not the end, but the beginning of the dark tale that follows. Joe Gillis was a struggling screenwriter, chasing the American dream in a city built on broken promises. He had once been hopeful about his career, but over the years, the industry had chewed him up and spit him out. His most recent script had been rejected, and his creditors were closing in on him. In a desperate attempt to outrun the repossession agents, Joe takes his car and drives through the streets of Los Angeles. His car breaks down in front of an imposing mansion on Sunset Boulevard, a relic from a bygone era. It's a place that seems untouched by time, and it pulls Joe in. Little does he know, this will be the place where his fate will be sealed. The mansion belongs to Norma Desmond, a former silent film star whose name once adorned marquees across the world. Norma has not made a film in over a decade, but in her mind, she is still a reigning queen of Hollywood. The reality is much harsher. Norma lives alone, save for Max von Mayerling, her loyal butler and former director. Norma is far from the glamorous figure she once was. She is now a woman living in a self-imposed exile, nursing the wounds of her fading stardom. When Joe arrives at the mansion, he has no idea what he is walking into. He believes he is just seeking refuge from his financial troubles, but soon he finds himself being drawn into Norma's delusional world. Norma sees Joe as the answer to her prayers. She believes that Hollywood will come calling for her again, and she wants Joe to help her write a script that will launch her grand return to the screen. Joe, initially reluctant, is desperate for money and agrees to help her, despite the unease he feels about her mental state. Norma is immediately taken with Joe. She sees him not just as a writer, but as someone who could revive her career and, by extension, her place in the world. She makes him an offer he can't refuse: stay with her in the mansion, write her script, and be well compensated. Joe, financially desperate, agrees to the terms, but it's clear from the start that he is trapped. The mansion, with its faded grandeur and eerie stillness, becomes a prison. Norma's attachment to Joe becomes obsessive, and soon, her delusions of grandeur extend beyond her film career. She begins to believe that their relationship is more than just a professional one. She imagines a future where they are a couple, reunited by her triumphant return to the silver screen. While Joe begins working on the script, he becomes more and more uncomfortable with the situation. Norma is erratic, constantly reminding him of her former fame and her belief that she will once again be the star she once was. Norma's mental state seems fragile, and she clings to her delusions with increasing intensity. She surrounds herself with memorabilia from her past, constantly reliving the moments of her former glory. She even keeps a private screening room in the mansion, where she watches her old films in an endless loop, reminiscing about her success. As Joe spends more time with Norma, he grows increasingly detached from her. He begins to realize that her dreams of a comeback are delusional, and he becomes more convinced that she is beyond help. But he is also trapped, unable to break free of the situation he has found himself in. Joe attempts to escape from Norma's grasp by reconnecting with Betty Schaefer, a young and ambitious script reader he had met while still working at Paramount Studios. Betty represents everything that Joe had once dreamed of: youth, opportunity, and the hope of a future free from Norma's manipulative influence. Joe begins an affair with Betty, using their relationship as a way to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the mansion. Betty is everything that Norma is not. She is hopeful and eager, driven by a desire to succeed on her own merits. She sees Joe as a talented writer who just needs the right break. She believes in Joe's potential and encourages him to leave Norma behind and pursue a more legitimate career in Hollywood. Betty's influence on Joe is significant. She encourages him to work on a new script, one that could bring him back into the industry in a meaningful way. But the closer Joe gets to Betty, the more Norma's jealousy grows. She senses that Joe is slipping away from her, and she becomes desperate to keep him in her life. Norma's jealousy turns into paranoia. She believes that Joe is abandoning her for Betty, and she begins to view him not just as a collaborator, but as her property. Norma becomes increasingly erratic, and her behavior takes a darker turn. She believes that she is entitled to Joe's time and attention, and she begins to see Betty as an obstacle to her plans. Norma becomes obsessed with the idea of making a comeback, and her delusions of grandeur deepen. She starts making grandiose plans for a film that will mark her return to the screen, even though no one in Hollywood is interested in her anymore. In a final, desperate act to regain control over Joe, Norma tries to manipulate him into staying with her. She convinces herself that their future together is destined to be one of fame and success, despite the reality of her situation. She believes that her return to Hollywood is inevitable, and she forces Joe to help her make this fantasy come true. The lines between reality and delusion blur further. Norma's obsession becomes dangerous, and her mental state continues to deteriorate. She begins to see herself as a martyr for the art of film, willing to sacrifice everything, including Joe, to make her comeback a reality. Max, Norma's loyal servant, finally reveals the truth about Norma's past to Joe. He explains that he was once a well-known director, the one who had launched Norma's career. He tells Joe that after Norma was discarded by Hollywood, he chose to stay with her, creating an illusion of normalcy in her life. Max's confession is a moment of clarity for Joe. He realizes the extent of Norma's delusion, and he begins to feel even more trapped in the situation. As the tension between Joe and Norma reaches its peak, Joe finally decides to leave. He has had enough of Norma's manipulation and the suffocating environment of the mansion. He tries to escape, but Norma refuses to let him go. In a fit of rage and desperation, Norma shoots Joe, believing that by killing him, she is preserving their future together. Her final, tragic act of obsession seals her fate. Norma, in the aftermath of the murder, is convinced that she is still a star, and she believes that the world will soon recognize her for her brilliance. She descends into madness, clinging to her delusions of grandeur. She believes that the cameras are still rolling and that she is about to make her grand return to the screen. The final moments of the film are chilling. Norma's delusion has fully consumed her, and she is left to play out her fantasies in front of a camera that no longer exists. The mansion, once a symbol of her success, now stands as a tomb, a monument to her fall from grace. Max, ever loyal, continues to indulge her, maintaining the illusion of a life that has long since passed. In the end, the film pulls away from Norma, leaving her alone in the darkness of her mind. The mansion is silent, a haunting reminder of the fleeting nature of fame and the destructive power of obsession. Joe's tragic fate is sealed, and the world that Norma once ruled has long since moved on. Sunset Boulevard is a powerful exploration of the dark side of fame, the destructive power of obsession, and the lengths to which people will go to maintain an illusion of glory. It is a timeless, cautionary tale, one that resonates even today as a reminder of the price of fame and the fragility of the human psyche. The story ends with the stark realization that Hollywood, like the rest of life, devours its own, leaving behind nothing but the remnants of dreams that once burned brightly, now smoldering in the ashes of time.